Uh, Good evening, seniors, friends, past presidents of the society. Uh, I welcome all of you to this expert chat in the form of a panel discussion on a very relevant subject. I welcome and thank the panelists, CA Dinesh Kanabar, Mr. Haigreve Khaitan, and Mr. P Desai. All of them readily accepted to share their experiences with all of us. Our special thanks to the to the moderator, CA Shariq Contractor, for his commitment. CA Mohsin Contractor, Senior Chartered Accountant, and Mr. Shariq's father passed away on 4th of February. It was a difficult time for him and his family. Our condolences are with him. Still, he continued with his commitment. Thank you for the same, Shariq bhai. I personally thank CA Sudhir Nayak of Dhruva Advisors and past President Chetan Shah and Raman Jokhakar and Managing Committee member Anand Bhatia, who helped us immensely. This year's theme of BCAS is Tradition, Transition and Transformation, 3 T's. The growing individuals, firms, businesses, voluntary bodies like BCAS need to go through these phases during their life cycle. During the dry run with the panelists and the moderator for this event, we realized that the professional services firm, which these 4 experts are representing, has really gone through these phases of 3 T's to reach to expertise, size, and scale today. For example, Mr. Khaitan will share with you a traditional family managed firm of lawyers from Calcutta, then setting up an office in Mumbai. How did they transited and transform into a professionally managed firm, continuing with the traditional name decided somewhere in 1911. We will also hear same experiences of other panelists and the moderator. I must thank Professor Sunil Sharma of IIM Ahmedabad. In his 45 to 50 minutes of presentation on professional service firms at BCA's 54th RRC, the refresher course, recently, ignited this today's event. He presented the growth challenges, execution challenges of small firms to grow medium and medium to grow bigger. When we heard him, we felt it is a good idea to discuss these issues at a larger forum, and that too directly with the PSF owners who are actually gone through this process. Originally, idea was to deal with chartered accountant professional, chartered accountant firms, but Dinesh Bhai, rightly and with his wisdom, suggested it to make it more broader with 2 more related professionals, so we understand the nuances with different perspectives and they are related to each other, they are relevant. He did not stop there. He even helped me to connect with 2 eminent panelists, Mr. Khaitan and Mr. Desai, and here we are. With these brief remarks and background, I want to give maximum time to the panelists and the moderator. So I welcome you once again and request Secretary Mir Seth to briefly introduce the speakers and the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhas. It's my pleasure to welcome and thank and give introduction of this very distinguished guest that we have today. They have such wide array of their achievements and accomplishments, so it's very difficult to be brief, but let me make a very humble attempt. Let me start with Mr. P Desai. He's a founder and managing director of Universal Consulting India and has directed 1,000 plus strategy and operations consulting projects for about 350 clients across life sciences, medical technology, agribusiness and food, industrial products, and financial services. He is also a founder of StratLenser, India's first digital platform for strategy consulting. Prior to founding Universal Consulting, he worked with Arthur Andersen and Company, Andersen Consulting, and he has completed the Advanced Management Program for Harvard Business School an MBA from Willamette University, an MS in Biology from Purdue University, and MS Biology from and BSc in Life Sciences from University of Mumbai. Triggered by the terror attack in Mumbai in November 2008, Jai authored a book titled Accountability, Angst, Awareness, Action on India's complex governance systems using a systems thinking lens. He is empaneled as a facilitator at Harvard Business Publishing, a subsidiary of Harvard Business School. Jai is also a recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Citation Award from the 175-year-old Willamette University, Oregon, USA. And to top it all, he is also a student of Indian classical music, playing sarod for almost 31 years and has been performing regularly at private concerts. Thank you, Jai, to be with us. We are honored.
Thanks, man.
Mr. Haigreve Khaitan. He's a senior partner of Khaitan and Company, known to all, and heads of the corporate mergers and amalgamation and private equity practice at the firm. He's an elected member of the National Executive Committee of the firm, which is responsible for firm's strategic growth and development. He advises companies, board of directors, and the financial institutions on wide range of corporate matters, including M&A, private equity, investments, corporate governance, corporate restructuring, and the list can go on. He has been involved in some of the most high-profile and complex M&A and private equity transactions in India, and is consistently recommended by many of the world's leading law chambers and accredited bodies, chambers, and partners, and they've ranked him as star individual for M&A and eminent practitioner for private equity. He's ranked amongst top 100 lawyers in India by India Business Law Journal through independent survey of general counsels. He's on board of director for various public listed companies such as Mahindra & Mahindra, CEAT Limited, JSW Steel Limited, Tech Mahindra, Geo Platforms, Torrent Pharma, etc. Thank you, Mr. Haigreve Khaitan, for being with us, and we welcome you.
Thank you.
And now let me turn to the difficult part of introduction of Mr. Dinesh Kanabar. Difficult because he is one of our own and has bound us by a commitment that his introduction should not be more than 3 lines. Challenging because Mr. Kanabar has contributed so much to the profession, has made his company such a brand name that it is a daunting task to limit his introduction to 3 lines. Nevertheless, in deference to your wish, sir, we are here. Mr. Dinesh Kanabar is a chartered accountant. He is also a core group member of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society and founder of Dhruva Advisors. Thank you, sir. It is always an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you.
And now, the person who's going to make this very interesting, the moderator, our own Mr. Shariq, Contractor. Shariq Bhai, as we call him, is a past president of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. He's a founder of Mrs. Contractor, Nayak and Krishnadwalas, and practices in areas of consultation, tax advisors, and representation of public and private limited companies, foreign companies, bank companies, airlines, government, and semi-government bodies. He's also a co-author of many books on taxation. And this list can go on because Shariq Bhai has also contributed so much to the profession and especially to the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society that we'll ever be grateful for him. Thank you for being with us, Shariq Bhai. And as usual, when you are there, audience never really bats an eyelid. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I believe now, let it be open. I'll leave it to Suhas to start the thing.
Shariq Bhai to take it over.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Suhas. Thank you, Mihir. Pleasure and a warm welcome to all of you. Delighted to hear the kind words. I think a lot exaggeration and a little truth in it. but most of it exaggeration. But I think this is delightful that we have so many enrollments for this kind of a program, because it merely goes to show that everyone is interested in building their professional practice. I think it shows a bit of a desire that the status quo is not working, that we need to change the way things are operating, and that somehow we have to grow our firms to a larger, meaningful size. But the statistics are quite dismal. The Institute has published that more than 90%, and this is a staggering number, more than 90% of the chartered accountancy firms are less than 4 partners. So everybody is talking about it, but I think everyone has some inhibition of taking the final plunge. And I'm aware of this because 20 years back, we were also a family-owned firm. And then in 2002, we converted ourselves into a professional firm through mergers with like-minded other firms. And thereafter, we have grown. So I know what are the restrictions, what are the inhibitions, what are the anxieties that one faces, and perhaps we will discuss that. But more importantly, we will discuss what it takes to build a firm, professional firm of size and caliber. The president talked about my father having recently expired just 5 days back. And I would like on my part to dedicate my presentation to his memory. I think the way in which we have grown is because of his foresight and vision. 20 years back, at the age of 70, 72, he took the decision that this status quo cannot continue and allowed us, that is me and my brother, to go in with a merger to professionalize the firm. It was not an easy decision. He was very, very attached to the name of his father, in whose name the firm was running. But he took that decision and allowed us to merge. I remember his words ringing in my ears at that time when he told me, "Why are you chasing a rainbow? We are already doing so well. Why do you want to take this decision and sort of chase a rainbow?" But he allowed us. And I think it is to his credit that he not only allowed us, but he knew when to let go and when to allow the next generation to take up the mantle, so to say. So I'm grateful to him, and I dedicate at least my presentation to him. Today we live in exciting times where technology and innovation is transforming the way in which businesses, in which professions are being conducted. I was reading a book, and I've read that book, and I would recommend people to read that book, The Future of Professions by Daniel Susskind, where he talks about that many professions may not be alive. They may be extinct by a particular time because technology and artificial intelligence may take over. Now, that may not happen completely. Maybe that's too much of a radical view. But I think the point remains that even if artificial intelligence and technology will not make jobs or the accountants or the lawyers or the management consultants extinct, I think the fact remains that those professionals who do not adopt technology will surely be replaced by those who do adopt technology. So I think that's a given. And the other point that is to be made is that whatever profession you are in, for example, if you are in as a tax consultant, you better be damn good. Because if you are doing routine, monotonous jobs, that is certainly going to be transformed and taken away by automation. But all that is not bleak. The good part is that we are living at a time of boom. The industry is booming, and the service sector is sort of raising the economy to its new level. And that wave can be ridden. I think we've got a great opportunity to ride a wave of growth and expansion, and we should not be missing that particular wave. Of course, to ride a wave, you should be prepared, you should be focused, you should be balanced. Otherwise, the wave can sweep you aside also. And I think that is important. And we're going to discuss the nuances of what is the kind of strategy that you need to adopt, what are the systems and processes that you need to put in place, how do you manage succession and leadership issues, and we will discuss all that. But I think, to my mind, the most important thing is a change of the mindset. It is important to take the plunge, a leap of faith, as I would call it, because these gentlemen out here are experienced. They've done this thing and have all the knowledge to share with you. And I'm sure today they will share the knowledge of what they have learned and what are the strategies they have adopted. And I think it will give us courage to perhaps take the plunge and go about with a change. But the only point that I would leave you with, and I think that's the thought I would leave you with, is to say you have to take the plunge to change, because change can be painful, but not changing can be disastrous. So I think that is my message to you today. And now we will start the program. The format of the program will be each of the speakers will speak for about 3 to 4 minutes. We will start with Dinesh, then with Haigreve, and thereafter with Jay. Uh, uh, Maybe because Dinesh is a chartered accountant, I think I have the leeway of giving you an extra minute, Dinesh, so that and I think being a chartered accountant, that much of a favoritism is permitted on my side on my part. Thereafter, we'll have a Q&A session and a discussion, open-ended discussion, and we will finally have 10-15 minutes where we will invite questions from the floor. I would love to leave at least 45 minutes for the question answers and 15 minutes for the floor. So I would request all of you to abide by this time limit. And now, with those words, I invite Dinesh Kanabar to say his initial remarks. Dinesh, yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Shariq. And again, uh, as you said, I would also like to dedicate this presentation to your dad, whom I had the privilege of interacting with and interacting with him a lot when I used to be regular, personally going to tax office for assessments and learned a lot from him. You spoke about experience, and there are two ways in which one can relate to a situation on growth and what does it take to build a professional services organization. One is to talk theoretically about the principles, etc., which I don't think I'm very qualified to do. But what I think I can do, and which hopefully will benefit everybody, is to share my experience of what I did, how I did, and why I did what I did. Before I go to that, one fundamental point comes up. I was hearing Suhas, and Suhas made a point that we are talking about tradition, transition, and transformation as a theme for BCA. And probably that might set the stage for what we are talking about. What's the tradition of the accounting profession? It's a professional services which we render to our clients, where we would like to deliver the highest quality of services. We would like to deliver absolute value to the clients in the most ethical manner and holding client confidence in the highest respect. And nothing that you do ever, howsoever you may transform, can these fundamental tenets ever go away. Those have to be embedded, because without those tenets, without that base, there is no superstructure which one can ever build. And one question which arises is, first of all, why grow? Is growth necessary? Shariq, you use the word leap of faith, and I don't think it's a leap of faith. I think it's an understood, accepted, planned leap, which is not a leap of faith. Sure, any leap is in some sense, a leap of faith, but it is not a leap of faith. And to some extent, one would just ask this question as to why do you need to grow? And I must share with you that when I decided to move out of KPMG and set up Dhruva, which is about 6 years back, I was personally at a dilemma. One idea was to set up a counsel practice and do your own thing with just a couple of assistants. Another was to grow a professional services organization. And it's not an easy choice to make. But as I looked at what I wanted to set out to do, and I look at every aspect of it, there were 2-3 things which made me look at creating an organization, and therefore probably why, to my mind, each one of us should look to grow. Dhruva has chosen only to do tax and regulatory work and nothing else. So we don't do any audit, we don't do internal audit, we don't do risk consulting, we don't do US GAAP, IFRS, nothing of that sort. We do just taxes and regulations which are relevant to that taxes. And yet, if you go back and look, there is such a lot of specialization within each aspect of tax. What applies to GST is very different from what applies to direct taxes. Within direct taxes, what applies to M&A and what applies to transfer pricing what applies to individual taxation, international taxation, are all very, very different facets. And can we all practice all of them? I'm very sure we can do that. But can we have deep expertise within all of them? Can we be a complete professional services organization? Can I put my hand on heart and say that I am a full services tax professional if we didn't have the size and scale that we were looking at? And the answer would be no. I don't think any of us can really look at and say that we can do all of this and do it in a best possible manner, at a cutting edge manner. As I mentioned, that tradition requires that when we render services to the client, those services are of the highest order and the client gets the best value out of us. And therefore, unless you have people coming together who really specialize in each of the aspect of services, and remember, this is only tax. If you have to talk about audit, again, there are different facets of audit. Again, if you talk about transfer pricing, within that you have specialization of transfer pricing of financial services separately from manufacturing companies and whatever else. So the professional services itself is getting so specialized that if you want to provide a broad range of services to the client, you have no option but to grow. And more important, size is not important just for the sake of size. Size also makes you relevant to the marketplace. And I would like to sort of emphasize on this word relevant. So for example, when we look at our clients and we go back and say that we are rendering services and we could make the client's voice heard to the government, for example, because the regulations need to change or something has been brought about which requires government to understand the perspective. Unless you are relevant, that ain't happening. And size becomes very, very critical. One, as I said, from the perspective of specialization that you need, another from being relevant to the marketplace. As I look at my clientele today, we have a fair mix, almost equal mix of MNCs and domestic players. Each one of them has a very, very different requirement. And unless I have that size, I cannot provide those. When we set out to create Dhruva, there was probably just a broad vision. And I must say that whatever else has happened thereafter has evolved. And in fact, speaking of Mr. Sharma, Sunil Sharma has done a case study on us at IIM Ahmedabad. And I have stated very clearly that much as it may appear that many of the things that we are doing were sort of strategically thought through as we founded the firm, the answer is it was not so. The broad vision was to say that when you look at the Big Four, there are certain, so Big Four has got some very, very good things going with it. I'll come to that in a minute. And there is something else which is not so acceptable in the marketplace, which is that there is always a conflict. You are doing audit services, non-audit services. And the idea was, can you create a professional services organization, which is truly independent of all conflicts and which is able to provide world-class tax services to the client. That was the overall vision with which we set out to create the organization. And everything else followed, every single step that we followed, which was in terms of people recruitment, in terms of sourcing clients, in terms of whatever, everything followed from it. As I said, I spent years in the Big Four, learned a lot from it, have great admiration from what the Big Four does, because organization building is something which I learned from earlier my stint at RSM and then from the Big Four. And as I said, I dealt on it to say that if one has to develop an independent organization, how does one go about doing it? And we went about building up to say, if we are creating quality organization, where is the talent going to come from? Are we going to pay the best in the marketplace? If so, how do we go about it? Are we going to get the best of the clients? The answer is, how do we go about doing it? And we chose and made certain decisions. Those decisions were not easy to make. One of the things which I felt was probably going not so right with the profession is everybody was chasing revenues, everybody was chasing clients. And we went about approaching the whole firm differently. And as you go along, Shariq, I'm sure we'll have questions which I would be happy to talk about. But the idea was to create a firm which is very different. And consistently, every single morning when I wake up, I ask myself this question, that are we truly different from what the market is all about? Are we truly rendering value to our clients? Are we truly independent? Are we truly top class in whatever we do? And that's been our driving force. Finally, if I may put, we had a geographical spread. We are in 6 cities. Again, every office that we have is not a namesake office. We got partners who head up those operations, partners who are very experienced and drive that. We have never looked upon size as an imperative. We have looked upon size as a means of staying relevant to our clients where our clients are. And then we chose to make a leap, which I thought was significant in my own eyes, which was to set up operations in UAE and Singapore. And the idea was that if I can render professional services of a high quality in India, can I build up a UAE practice, which practices UAE tax laws? And can I have a practice in Singapore, which practices Singapore tax laws, not the corridor stuff, but the local regulation work? And again, we have built both those practices precisely on the value philosophy, which I've had with Dhruva in India. And I'm glad that market has accepted what we have done. There is a huge market for independent professional services. I would echo very much what you said, Shariq, that the services sector is booming. There's enough and more we can do out here. We have to get rid of shackles. We have to learn to be inclusive in our approach, and then the growth is almost inevitable.
Thank you, Dinesh. That was inspiring, and I'm sure I would have a lot of questions to ask you to pick your brains even more. Because beyond the point, I agree with you, you cannot plan everything. You have to strategize broadly and then take the plunge. And it is in that sense that I meant that you plan everything, but you cannot identify each and every problem. Finally, you have to take that plunge yourself. Haigreve, all yours.
So thank you, and that was really inspiring, Dinesh bhai. So maybe I'll start with the journey of our firm and how it started and where we are today, and that will give perspective of the change, Shariq bhai, you were talking about. So the firm is now more than 110 years old. The firm was started in my grandfather's generation by a member of the Constituent Assembly, which drafted the Indian Constitution, and was really started as a firm, as an Indian law firm, as an alternate to the British law firms which existed in those times. And with the philosophy that, look, India will get independence at some point in time, and the Indian business will also need professional advisors. And that was the history on how the firm started. In terms of change, until the 70s, we were really a Calcutta firm, and we were nowhere else. And Bombay and Calcutta being the two sort of premier business centers, it served us very well to remain in Calcutta and not look beyond Calcutta at all. It was only during the change of government and let's say the business environment in West Bengal not keeping up with the rest of the country, that we looked at sort of expanding outside of Calcutta. And with the Supreme Court having moved to New Delhi, the capital having moved to New Delhi, we had no alternative but to set shop in New Delhi. Finally, then in Bangalore, because of the tech boom, and much later, only about 20 years ago, we came to Mumbai. So how did that change happen? The change was really, I should say, a necessity more than anything else. So while we enjoyed a premier service status until the 70s, we could not remain as a premier law firm in the country, not being in regions where business has moved. So not being in Mumbai and not being in Delhi as the two capitals, financial capital and political capital, was just not an option. So our change was necessitated because business has moved out of Calcutta. And that made us realize that, look, we will remain as a regional firm, we will die out as a regional firm unless we move out. So that's when we started expanding. What was the strategy to expand? The strategy to expand was, look, how do we professionalize this family firm? So the first thing was that, look, we must be owned and managed professionally, while it started like a family firm. And we very soon converted to a completely owned and professionally managed firm. We attracted a lot of very good lateral talent. We realized that, look, it's only people who really matter in our profession. And we were very fortunate to attract very good lateral talent in the firm. And that was a huge change, a move from a family firm to, let's say, a professionally owned and managed firm. What else was our strategy at that time? So we had a strategy that, look, premier work, premier clients. And we continued with that strategy, whichever city we were in, whatever practice we did, we said we must focus on premier work, premier clients. And then we said that, look, in order for lawyers to really provide that premier work service, we need very good infrastructure and support. So another strategy was to make sure that infrastructure and support is available to all the lawyers in the firm universally. And if we talk about, say, infrastructure and support 20 years ago, we can talk about good air-conditioned offices, a good library. We can talk about, the physical infrastructure. If we talked about, 10 years ago, that physical infrastructure moved already to IT infrastructure, to know-how, to knowledge. And today we know what infrastructure will mean, connectivity and digitization. So the pillars for our growth were, knowledge management, technology, physical infrastructure, people, systems. And all of this we did through a professional team, not the lawyers, but experts in those fields to join the firm and help us build each of this. So we attracted the best HR talent to head us. We attracted the best knowledge management talent. So our HR head is from the Tata Group. Knowledge management head is from Accenture. Our IT head is from a large IT services company. Our strategy head who taught us business sectors is from none other than KPMG. So we attracted people to show us the way and show lawyers that, look, how to provide all of these surroundings around the delivery of legal services. And the last thing we realized is that we have to move away from being generalist lawyers to be specialists in our field. And what we did is, when I started practicing, whether it was a real estate acquisition, I would do it. It was an M&A, I would do it. It would be a litigation in court, I would do it. We were all generalists. So we were the GPs whom you would go to. From the GPs to building a sort of a hospital with specialists is the transformation we built. And each one of us said that, look, we will have in one house a team of specialists who will be absolutely top tier. We'll collaborate and work together internally, but we will be absolute specialists. So this transformation from a family firm to a regional firm, to a professionally owned and managed firm, to a national firm, and a firm of generalists to specialists is really what we did over the last 2 decades. I think progressively from the 70s, but primarily the last 2 decades. So that's been really the story. And I should say in 2001, when we set shop in Mumbai, we were about 50 lawyers nationally across the firm. Today, we are 750 lawyers across the firm. So that's really been from a pool of, say, a dozen partners, we are 160 partners. So that's how, our story has unfolded.
Wonderful, Haigreve. I think it's the growth has been completely exponential, and you are a law firm to reckon with. It's interesting that you and Dinesh mentioned almost the same thing, that don't chase the clients to begin with, create the infrastructure, get the right talent, and that's the strategy to be adopted. Jay, all yours now.
Thanks, Dinesh. Thanks for inviting me on this panel. So let me sort of walk you through the journey of our firm, Universal Consulting, which is a strategy consulting firm over the last 27 years. So I set up the firm in 94, just after India had liberalized. I was 30 years old, and my total capital savings was 50,000 rupees at the time, and that was what I used to start the firm. And I said that, well, why don't we focus on working with small, mid-sized companies who can't afford the fees of an Anderson Consulting? So this is in 1994. So set up the firm at that point in time. Our initial focus was on the SME sector. And in fact, we focused on operations improvement work, on organization structuring work, and on information system strategy work. In fact, I remember meeting Dinesh when he was at RSM, because we were doing an information system strategy project for RSM. It must have been, I don't know, 96 or 97. So, very, very long time ago. That's the first time I met Dinesh. Following that, in the year 2000, you all remember the dot-com crash and the technology crash, 9/11, and there was a global recession. At that point in time, in 2001 and 2, we started thinking that there's likely to be now a focus on growth as the economy opens up and Indian companies will start to look overseas. So why don't we move from operations, organization, and information systems work to strategy-oriented work? At that time, 20% of our work was strategy and 80% was operations and organization consulting work. And I think 90% of our clients were SMEs and 10% were mid-sized companies. So we decided to make two big changes at that time. First was to focus on strategy work, and second is to flip completely and focus on mid-sized and large-sized clients. At that time, it really seemed like an impossibility, but we decided to go after that in 2002, made that decision, with the result that today, 85% of our work is strategy, and about 60% of our clients are multinationals, and about 40% are mid to large size Indian companies. Following that, there was a big liquidity in India, if you remember, in the early, globally actually, in the early 2000s, and everybody grew and we grew along with them. And then there was this hard stop with the global financial crisis. So at that point in time, we decided to deepen our industry focus across a wide range of industries. Prior to that, we would do whatever work came our way. Then we started building different industry verticals. So we said, let's focus on life sciences, medtech, industrials, banking and financial services, agribusiness. That was around the time of the global financial crisis. Started to build out those practices. A little bit later in 2012, 13, you remember the anti-corruption movement and you remember the policy paralysis. So right. We found that growth started slowing down. So we started focusing very heavily on implementation consulting, which is actually implement the work that you do for clients. We were doing that for several years. So we started positioning ourselves around strategy implementation. And then that brings us, of course, to the big crisis, which we have all faced in the year 2020. I mean, I remember seeing so many strategy documents in the last 20 years with clients saying, this is our vision 2020. I don't recall a single one saying that we will be encountering a pandemic at that time. And that's the nature of crisis. You don't know that it's going to happen unless you are very observant and pick up those signals very, very carefully. Given the crisis that hit all of us a year ago, we decided to do three things. First, we abandoned our office completely. So we're not work at home, we're work at home forever. So our firm is completely virtual and for the foreseeable future will remain so. The second thing we did is because the technology, the process of using technology had increased in any case in the last few years, we decided to create a digital platform for strategy consulting and have independent consultants register on the platform. So if a client wants some piece of work that is too small for us to do, they can go to the platform. Today, that platform, it's called Strat Lancer, which is a concatenation of strategy Lancer. We already have 2,000 independent consultants on the platform across all practice areas. And we also use them for some of our projects to supplement the need to have scale beyond what we can afford to build as a firm. The third thing we've decided to do is to completely focus on just one area, which is on life sciences. So as of this year, we'll do strategy and operations and organization consulting, but only in the life sciences, medical technology, healthcare services, diagnostic space. So that's the decision we took in this crisis year. And one of the things that I've learned in the last 27 years is that in the absence of the ability to predict, what is most important is the ability to adapt. And therefore, being a student of biology and having studied evolution quite closely, I think the one thing that I learned is that if you want to survive and grow, you have to be supremely adaptive. That's my opening comment.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. That's very interesting because you seem to have converted every crisis that was there into an opportunity for yourself and for the profession in that sense. So that's interesting. And I think that's what the crises are all about. I think Churchill once mentioned, never let go a good crisis to waste. So that's what has happened. I think we will start with the Q&A right now. And I can begin again with Dinesh. This is a question that I think a lot of the chartered accountants want to know. And you have yourself, you mentioned it briefly, but maybe you can elaborate that a little bit, that you have transformed your firm into a large firm, a firm with a brand. But why are normally CA firms not growing in your opinion? What is holding them back? I think the Prime Minister also wants CA firms to grow and become one of the multinational firms, but it's not happening. What is the reason, you think?
So two things, Shariq. First is, while it gladdens my heart when I hear the Prime Minister talk about saying that the big four are there and now can the next big four be from India or whatever else, I think probably that's not even necessary. I don't think you need to have a big four emerge from India because big four grew in different times. It was a different model. It remains to be seen how relevant that model is, and we may not necessarily find that model to replicate today. But to your question, and it goes back first to the question as to why do people not want to grow or are unable to grow. And when I was starting Dhruva, one of the questions was, could I not start a Dinesh Kanabar and company? And even today, people tell me, and we'll talk a little bit later about brand versus people and continuity of firms, etc. And the reason why we chose the name Dhruva is because it was the initials of all the founding partners. So that's how the name Dhruva came up. And we said that this is truly a firm which is professional in nature. So coming to your question, people are very fussy about their name. I'm not making a value judgment here on what is right and what is wrong. But if you want to grow, it's not about the name. Number one. Number two, people are very fussy about power. So you want to control whatever is there with you. So for example, when Haigreve says that, look, I've got a specialist for each thing, Haigreve cannot sit and control the deliverables of everybody. What he can control is to have the right sort of people, recruit right, train right, have a database, have a quality control, whatever else. But he cannot sit and supervise everybody to do what they are doing. And that's not necessary. But somewhere along the line, as chartered accountants, probably we just like to control every single thing that goes out. So question is, are you able to build on? And third is, when we, if you look at our curriculum teaches us to be subject matter experts, but it does not teach us to be management experts. We are still fortunate, I must say, that we have the big four or some of those where you can get trained into how to run an organization and institution. But our curriculum does not train us to be management experts, and therefore it doesn't lie with us to say what do we need to do. Some of the things which sound to be pretty obvious, some of the things which sound to be so commonsensical is not necessarily so commonsensical. So for example, building up a good database, consistency, ranging from everything, the way you write to the way you present, to the way you reference everything else, how quality happens, how reviews happen, how inter-office challenges happen, etc., are things which are not too difficult really, but it's not something which has been ingrained in us. It's something which has not been taught to us, and therefore we refuse to sort of, in some sense, learn it. But it's all about saying that do I want to be a one-person army? Do I want to control destiny of everybody? Or am I comfortable with a set of people who are my equals in their respective spheres? Sure, and I must make this point. I am the CEO of Dhruva, but when we have a partners meeting, I can say this categorically and emphatically that each partner is equal. When they sit on that table, there is no senior, junior, you respect people for the views they bring. Sure, as a CEO, I have a responsibility to provide a direction, take a call. And that's what organization building is all about. And that's not what we as chartered accountants are used to, accustomed to doing. So we want our name, we want our power, and we believe that if the quality is not something which passes our muster, it is not quality.
Thanks, Dinesh. I completely agree with this, and I think that's been the experience that if you want to control power all the time in your hand, you do not get quality people. And if you want quality people, you have to respect their opinions and their insights also. Otherwise, there's no point.
Shariq, I'll just make one additional point, Shariq, and we'll come to it a little bit later.
Yeah.
But as Dhruva, we believe that we are an entrepreneurial organization. And the question is, how do you, so if today we have 22 partners, how do you have 22 entrepreneurs and yet at the same time working to create a symphony in our organized manner? But please.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jay, I think you mentioned a question to you. You did talk about strategy, and I think from a consulting point of view, strategy is your core area. But when you started your practice, obviously you took I'm using the term again, a leap of faith. You left Anderson, you started your own thing. It must have been a very, very big decision. What was your strategy at that time as to what you wanted to do? You mentioned it briefly. Did it work the way you wanted it to work? Things must not have gone your way. And how have you modulated your strategy as you have grown? A little bit of more insights to that.
So when I decided to quit, Anderson at the age of 30, and Anderson was obviously a very big name at that point in time. Obviously my parents and my in-laws threw a fit when I said I'm going to quit and set up my own firm. So then I actually decided to wait a little bit, and I waited for 6 months and then submitted my resignation and then informed them a week later that I'd already resigned. So then, the decision. When we started, we were not a strategy focused firm, as I mentioned. We were hardcore operations improvement, organization restructuring, information systems, because that's what the country required and that's what companies required. It was just past 91, the Indian economy had liberalized, and companies were trying to reduce costs, become more competitive, and determine and improve the quality of service they provided the customers. So that's exactly what was required. At that point in time, I have to say that there was no clear vision of this is what we'll achieve in 2000 or 2005, because I think I knew that we were too small to have the luxury of those choices, and you would have to do whatever came our way. So in the early years, if Dinesh would call us for operations or information systems work at RSM, we'd be there. If a jewelry manufacturer called us, we'd be there. If overhead cranes manufacturer called us, we'd be there also. So our main strategy was to look older than we were. So one of my cardinal rules at that time, I was 30 years old. I had a mustache at the time, and everybody was hired, all 21-year-olds, 3-4 of them. So the rule, when you go to factory, make sure you grow a mustache, you look older than you actually are. So that was the strategy at that point in time, just to be acceptable to clients, because consulting really was a cottage industry in those days. And so we would often go to clients, and when we started talking about, okay, this is the proposal we'll send you, oftentimes clients in the 90s thought the proposal was actually a project report. So that's how unevolved these small mid-sized companies were at that time. Large companies, of course, knew what it was, but the SME sector was very different. So it was a tough battle when we first started.
Okay, no, that's interesting, and I hope you have. I see a little bit of gray in your hair. I don't know whether you put color in order to show age or what. But anyway, Haigreve, a question for you. I think you talked about establishing a firm in this particular region from Calcutta. So you've also started very much from the scratch, at least in this region. It would be really interesting to know how did you attract the clients that you did attract? It's easy to say that, we want big clients to come in, but how did you manage to attract those clients? How did you manage to retain those clients? And what is it that you can say, this is special, this is unique to your firm?
So to be honest, Shariq bhai, I have to admit that, the goodwill of the firm over so many years and decades was a huge advantage for us. So while we were not in this city, but we were a known firm in the business community. So when we stepped into this city, we had several sort of friends, well-wishers, whom we could go to and seek that first opportunity for local work. What we did very consciously do was only take up initially work which we had the capability to do locally. We didn't have a large team, and there were only certain things which we could do. So if we couldn't do something, we would frankly tell the client that, look, we don't have the capability to do this in this office at the moment. We didn't want to fail. We wanted to give the client an absolutely superlative experience. We wanted to give value add to the client, and we really wanted to build a local reputation. The second thing we did is we said that, look, we will go to a large client and do the smallest of things for the large client. We will start at the bottom. We will not aspire to get the biggest job or the most complex job at the first instance. And we will brick by brick build our reputation. And we were satisfied with that. So we went to businesses whom we knew for the first opportunity. We went for the smallest jobs, and we delivered where the client came back and again to us to say, okay, can you do more? And that was how we went step by step, I should say.
Right. I think that's completely it. They say goods can be consumed, but services have to be experienced. So if you give the client the kind of service experience, they would probably come back to you. Jay, I think I just want you to again pick your brains on what you mentioned. You talked about the issue about setting up processes and systems in place in order to grow. But there's always a feeling that there's a dilemma. When you are a small firm, you are nimble, you are flexible, and you did allude to that also. You can change quickly in directions, you can take decisions very quickly. How do you balance that out? Because as you grow, you have to be able to, you have to put processes in place. Does that sort of impediment, how does it help? And it is inevitable. So how do you do that?
So, I mean, there is a balance between order and chaos. If you look at the one end that very creative firms, with the advertising and so on, they tend to be a little bit more chaotic but very creative. But if you're too chaotic, you cannot replicate your creativity. On the other hand, if you're too ordered, lots of SOPs and so on, then you cannot sort of adapt to the changing environment. The ideal spot to be is somewhere in between, not too much chaos and not too much order or processes. And I think that's what I think oftentimes when firms are very young, they tend to be more chaotic. They try to grow up and become, on the other end, become too ordered, which then compromises your adaptability. So even in all natural systems, there's a spot in the center, which is called the sweet spot. And that sweet spot is what is the appropriate balance between chaos and order. And it is very hard to describe mathematically what that is. But as a leader, you tend to know that if I put into place too many of these processes, I'm not going to be nimble. But if I don't put in place any process at all, I'm never going to grow. So right. All complex systems, like organizations or like organisms, always have that sweet spot, which is actually called the edge of chaos.
Right.
It's not chaos, it's called the edge of chaos.
Right.
And that's where you need to try to be in between.
Yeah, I guess some amount of chaos also breeds creativity, so to say. And I think the biologist in you is always coming out in the answers that you give. Dinesh, I think this is a question that everybody wants to know. And I think already on the chat, a few people in the Q&A have asked this. The question is, how do you decide on partner compensation? Different partners bring in different on table. In terms of technical competency, I understand. But some people can be rainmakers, some are very good at execution, some take in a lot of work as far as the firm admin is concerned, cross-selling and so on. How do you manage that? What is the mechanism by which you decide partner compensation?
So before you go to partner compensation is maybe a concept of partner evaluation.
Right.
And Shariq, for whatever reason, right or wrong, we chose partner revenues not to be an important measure of partner compensation.
Right.
Maybe part of it is historical because many of the partners that are there in the firm have Big Four experience, etc. And we did not want people to just start chasing revenues. We said that when you start chasing revenues, you're not enjoying what you are doing. You're really after clients. You become sort of to some extent a salesman. All the time you're trying to make a sale. Whereas what you need to do as a professional services organization is really to enjoy the work that you are doing. One other question, Shariq, which is even more fundamental, is that the word partner in the large organizations has come to become a career destination. There is really no true partnership. The partners meet once a year, maybe they don't even know each other. Whereas partnership, as we have understood, is people being able to trust each other, build on each other, grow on each other, and sort of enjoy each other. And will that continue as we grow in number? I don't know. But today, whilst we are relatively smaller compared to some of these larger organizations, we're trying to build a true partnership. And that goes to the answer of the partner compensation, because if you are a true partner, you know that this is the pie that exists, the revenues of the firm minus expenses, what is left on the table, and therefore what is to be shared among people. And we put a fundamental proposition that it will never be that one partner will succeed and one will fail, or the firm will succeed but the partner will fail, or vice versa. We said this is collective because, and again, as I said, a lot of it is sort of historical, anecdotal, because we have seen while the Big Four have many good things, several good things that I have learned, there are few of those things which really make people unhappy, and we wanted to sort of get over those people. So what we have is a partner evaluation mechanism which talks about collaboration, which speaks about quality, which speaks about delivery, then speaks about revenues. But really, revenue is not at the top of the pyramid. So we came to a conclusion that it is very rare for people to be good at everything. So there are people who are naturally able to go out, build connects, are able to make a sale, whatever you would like to call it. There are others who are technically very sound, and we didn't want one to be at the cost of the other. We have seen that ever so often. And therefore, the mechanism of compensation that we have probably, in a sense, mirrors what is there in so to say a Big Four, to say what is a partner starting compensation, and thereafter people grow on the basis of the evaluation rather than on. It makes it a little bit subjective, it makes it a little bit complex, but while we are small, we think we can do it.
Yeah. So while we discuss this, both Jay and Haigreve, if you have any thoughts or any ideas, please do come in and share it. Because when I have seen this, I've had many discussions on these issues, and some of the firms very clearly follow the policy of, if I may put it, eat what you kill.
Yeah. Make and take.
Yeah. But again, as you said, there are problems to it. Also, whatever you do, in a way, people tend to chase the goals that have been set for them. So that's another balance that we have to kind of work out. But anyway, so I agree, again, coming back to you, you mentioned a lot about talent that you acquired. You talked about lateral talent coming your way and stuff like that. Again, would like to know from you, how did you attract that talent and how did you retain that talent with you? Because I would believe talent is not only about paying them a good compensation. There are lots of other factors that are involved in that. How did you manage that? And how did you tackle the issue of talent which has been trained, leaving your organization and going away somewhere else? So both those issues. And I think that's relevant to all professionals.
So I'd say that, recruiting lateral talent, the first few recruits of very good senior experienced lateral recruits are the toughest, because that's when you are small, you are building a firm, and whether it will really work out or it won't work out, nobody knows, and that's the toughest part. And there is a lot of, let's say, it's a leap of faith and trust in people getting together. But while recruiting, if your principles and your structure is correct, so we were perceived as a family firm, but internally we were neither family owned nor family managed or controlled. And to convey that message clearly to potential lateral recruits was the most important communication we had to make. And not just communicate, but to actually show in documents that we are not that family firm. And to show that what an opportunity there could be in getting together to that really professional firm, where there is a certain goodwill, there's a brand to go, there's access to clients. And if one can laterally recruit, then one can grow in leaps and bounds under this platform. So I think the biggest task I faced was really convincing people initially that, look, we are really not employing people. We are really creating that true partnership.
Right.
And I think that was the initial one. Today, I think it's a slightly different situation where we have a large partnership, and one has to be very selective in terms of culture. One has to be very selective in terms of what your principles are. And while recruiting laterally, the biggest, I mean, competence, it goes without saying. I mean, you can't, we would not recruit without that. But I think attitude and culture and getting along, without which we would not recruit today laterally at all. We would take a lot of time. We would do a lot of assessment. But without that, not recruit. And culture, I think, is the biggest roadblock for our lateral recruitment.
But you surely you must have found areas where there were cultural differences in people. How would you manage that then?
Of course. And I think there are two sides to a coin. To have cultural diversity and to have diversity in the firm is welcome. To imbibe new ideas, to imbibe new values, I think that is welcome. But to destroy the culture of, let's say, team play, to destroy the culture of looking at the big picture, is something we didn't tolerate. And of course, we had mishaps in the way. In our, let's say, 20-year journey of going out and recruiting laterally, we had a few mishaps where you thought, yes, you could get along. You thought that culturally we were aligned, but it didn't work out. But then you take a call very quickly and early. What we also learned is that, look, if something doesn't work out, there may be two extremely good professionals, but they have a different cultural value system or a different vision or strategy, then it's best to sort of not be together and be part as friends very quickly before you have more damage to both sides.
No, correct. I mean, I guess you have to take some risks and you cannot be insulated completely. Jay, I think you mentioned a lot of interesting things about the use of technology, and I think you seem to have made maximum use of technology. And I think COVID has shown us that, technology is going to be the driver. As a joke goes, that it is not your CTO, it is not your CEO, but it is COVID which has driven technology in a lot of firms. Tell me, what have you done in the front of technology, and what are your future plans? What do you see as happening, and how are you going to use technology as you go forward?
Yeah. So I think for that, I mean, the credit for that goes to one of my directors, Shankar, who's been with us for 27 years now. In fact, Dinesh, he was working with us, on that RSM project also way back in 97, 98. But he sort of created this entire plan several years ago to create a knowledge management system, which was frankly 15, 17 years ago. But then we ultimately put that entire thing onto the cloud. So today, any of our consultants can access any report produced by us, any proposal produced by us, on the cloud. And this has been happening for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe. We also did a few dry runs way back in 2017. We had what we call cloud days, which is that on a particular day in the month, you have to work on the cloud completely. I mean, of course, we didn't know the pandemic was coming 2 years later. But that really helped us because even support functions like talent management or accounting put all their files completely online. With the result that when the pandemic hit, I mean, for us it was very easy because we were already architected to work completely in the cloud. The other interesting part was the building of a platform for strategy consulting. And the reason we started doing that is that I realized that we can never achieve the scale of the large firms because the cost would be too much, and the attendant risks with that. But we asked the question, do we need to have all those people full-time in the firm? And the answer obviously was no. The whole sort of independent professional movement had sort of begun in India a few years ago. I mean, the US pre-COVID, 40% of all professionals are on contract. They're independent contractors. And that trend has come to India. It's only accelerated because of COVID. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we said, why don't we create a platform where if a client wants a small piece of work, which is too small for us, they can put that on the platform and some independent consultant can do it. So at least the client's needs are served. Thanks to COVID, of course, the demand for that has increased, and so StratLancer, which is our platform for that, now has 2,000 consultants. So if we are working on a complicated sort of like vaccines project, which has some expertise that we don't have in our firm, we simply put a requirement on the platform. Within 48 hours, our StratLancer team will say, okay, here are the 4 people who have vaccines expertise. And they can work with our consulting team for a few hours a week. So that's worked out very well. It's primarily for smaller projects, but we also use it as a sourcing base to satisfy the projects that we need. Yeah. I do think that over the next 7 to 10 years, a lot of at least management consulting will be platform based. In fact, in the legal profession, it's already being used. There are companies like Leclerc, Ryan, and Advanced Law and so on who are digital platforms which provide these services. So in the future, we may even take this StratLancer platform and merge it into our consulting firm, and so that we have the scale that we otherwise would find very difficult to achieve.
Very interesting. Dinesh, Haigreve, are you guys also thinking any way in those terms of putting the knowledge on the platform, inviting people, solving it through outsourcing and stuff like that? Either one. Dinesh?
So we again use technology a lot, and maybe just let me come back. You mentioned that 99% or whatever, 95% of the people are for partners or less. And as COVID has shown, we saw chartered accountants, probably smaller ones, not really using information technology. And those of us who were using technology all the time, connectivity all the time, were quickly able to adapt, etc. As Jai mentioned. Knowledge management becomes yet another thing. And knowledge management really is, as Jai mentioned, everything that you do available on a platform, not just available on a platform, but sort of index properly. So if you are doing something or giving opinion on a particular section, you can very quickly go to the knowledge management portal and come back and say, this is what the firm did at what point of time, what were the views that emerged. If you got opinion of a council, it is available right out there, all appropriately indexed. And all the information that we have on a cloud. And no, so technology from the tax perspective, Shariq, I would say is into 2 parts. There are firms which are actually using technology to do compliance work. That's not what we would like to do. Consciously, as a firm, we have kept away from it. We believe that that's not a practice area that we want to do. But technology to enhance our effectiveness, technology to get information that we need, technology to get global databases is something which we absolutely practice.
I agree.
Yes, I mean, I would really say that we are at the stage in the firm where all of the technology for us to use internally, we are right there and improving every day. A technology platform to offer to the client, we are in the stage of, let's say, testing that out to how to open our internal technology platforms partly for client use.
Right.
And that is something we're in the phase of looking at how to open up in a small and selective way.
Okay.
I think that is the future. I completely agree with Jay, and that is something which is inevitable. And
Right.
whether you go down the value add way, where you go out the large project way, small project way, large client, small client, I think that is the future.
Yeah. Yes, completely agree. Dinesh, one more question to you. You have created a large tax-based firm, a well-known brand, uh, but we have seen so many iconic names who have run firms who have sort of withered away almost over the years. So what are your plans and what are your thoughts? And I think I'm going to pose the same question to Haigreve also as to succession. How are you going to manage the succession of the firm? How are you going to create the next line of leadership? What are your thoughts and plans on that?
So first and foremost, succession is something which, if it has to happen in a smooth manner, is something which has to be openly discussed and not a subject matter which is put under the carpet. It is not sort of an elephant in the room lurking behind, but it is something which we are absolutely focused on. And the way we have approached it is that we have reached out to one of the best known management HR firms, sort of identified a team of partners who we believe could be potentially in succession line, train them, have a well-defined period by which I would not be the CEO of the firm. I would sort of move on to be a chairman. Somebody else takes on. There is a transition period. So all of those have been identified and building blocks are there. And the people are being trained to sort of take on that leadership position. They know that one of them will emerge to be the leader within the organization. But the key is letting them sort of into that mode, training them, giving them a parallel run so that they are not sort of left loose, and thereafter stepping back genuinely to let them take it forward.
Right. I think that's the important one, right? I'd like to again remember my father and say that he was a person who let go at the time to allow things to grow. Haigreve, what are your thoughts? How are you planning succession and continuity of the firm?
So in different ways, I think the philosophy of the firm has been to delegate and empower. And that delegation and empowerment means we are building our new leaders. And today we have, whether you call them in terms of practices or whether you call them in lines of business or in terms of the management, we have a very delegated and empowered structure, which already creates your new leaders. And the second is that we consciously are committee managed. So from a succession perspective of vision, strategy, and the top of the firm, we are committee managed. So we are in a way automatically hedging and creating successors automatically. So there may be one or two individuals who sort of steer that committee today, but being committee managed means you already have. If something happens to a certain individual, then there can be nothing can go wrong. The committee is still right there to take the firm forward.
Right. So Jay, I think you should step in at this stage. Should the goodwill of the firm in a situation like this belong to the firm, or does it belong to the partners? And if the founding members and the partners, from a strategic point of view, when they retire, should they be getting a part of the goodwill? Should they be compensated in some manner? How does it happen? Because there can be a dilemma. If you want to attract talent, perhaps that kind of taking out by the founding partners or the managing partners may be difficult. What are your thoughts on goodwill and how do you manage the goodwill of a firm?
Actually, I'm not a CA, and I know that this goodwill issue is one that a lot of accounting firms deal with. So I'm actually
that's the reason I'm asking you from a management point of view as to how should CAs manage the goodwill.
So let me tell you what I know that the global strategy firms do, to the best of my knowledge from my experience with one or two firms, is that they don't pay out any goodwill at all. When a partner retires, the shares simply go back into the pool, and those units are then distributed across to the new partners. So a lot of the big global strategy firms, which actually operate like one firm all over the world, don't really have any payout for goodwill to the best of my knowledge.
Right.
So that's what I have heard, but I'm not best equipped to answer the question.
Yeah, Dinesh, your views. I had an interesting episode. One of my international connects, their firm, the father retired from the firm. The son took over his share and paid him for his share in the firm. So the goodwill was paid by the son to the father. It was a very clear understanding. But how do you think about this? Does the goodwill belong to the firm, partner? How do you take it out?
I don't know how to think about it. I can tell you what we do.
Right.
The goodwill of the firm belongs to the firm categorically, and a retiring partner does not get a penny after he retires. So no question. That was so in RSM, that's so here. I was talking to an Indian CEO of a global management consulting organization. I'll not go into names. And I'm just trying to recollect that conversation. And he said that there are 3 sins which a CEO of a professional services firm can create. One is he can charge for goodwill, and they will ensure that nobody can really make money out of it ever. Number 2, he can take his firm public, and that will ensure that he gets the money really, but the every year you are sort of quarter on quarter. And third is he can merge the firm, but just because he is retiring, and which will only ensure that the culture and the firm dies with him. This was his view, and I'm just sharing that with you.
Haigreve, your views?
Well, I can only tell you to share 2 pieces of information. One, as far as our firm, it's pretty much exactly on the same model. When you come in, you don't pay for goodwill. When you go out, you don't get anything for goodwill. Goodwill is permanent in the firm. And that's the model we have followed, worked very well, very good to attract talent, very good for the stability of the firm and for that institutional approach. However, there are professional services organizations, including law firms, where goodwill is valued. And when you take in a partner buys into the goodwill. And when a partner goes, then you again value goodwill and you get value for the goodwill. But does that really create an institutional framework? I'm not quite sure.
Right. No, I think goodwill is a pretty interesting, and sometimes a lot of professional firms have not grown because of this hang up about the goodwill has to be mine and I don't want to share it and so on and so forth. I think before we open it out to the panelists, one question which you can answer very quickly, all 3 of you. When do you see an Indian multinational professional firm in each one of your areas? Haigreve, maybe you can start.
I'd say that a true multinational, perhaps sometime, but I think an international footprint of firms from our sort of generation, you'll see very soon. You've seen some baby steps, but I think you'll see that. And multinational, not as difficult as we think it, but perhaps some time away.
Right. Jay?
In management consulting, I think it's unlikely to happen because every ecosystem, the consulting ecosystem globally, every ecosystem has a carrying capacity. It can carry only so many firms. There are a huge number of global firms, the Big Four, for example, the second tier, which is just below the Big Four. Then there are the top tier strategy firms, the middle tier strategy firms. I think the time and place to create a global management consulting firm is over.
Okay. That's interesting. But you do have a lot of large firms operating in India, the consulting firms.
No, I'm saying a firm grown in India, which will become a global multinational management consulting firm, I think is very, very unlikely.
Okay.
It's happened in technology. It's happened in technology because there were no sort of competitive technology firms already set up. I mean, if you look at Cognizant or Wipro and all these guys, the Infosys, they've done it. But in consulting, no.
Okay. Dinesh?
As I explained to you earlier on, Shariq, we are operating in UAE. We have a team of about 25 people doing local work. We have a team of about 12 people in Singapore. We are looking to expand in a number of other locations. I don't think by remotely you can call us multinational or international. I think there is one thing which probably Haigreve did not mention. One of the reasons why becoming multinational firm is a challenge is that there are local laws which require you to recruit locally and do whatever else. So that probably inhibits whatever you need to do. And for an Indian firm to set up an office overseas, it requires a huge amount of investment, which is not easy to come by. I do hope that in Dhruva, we are able to create a sort of a large footprint outside of India and make a meaningful impact over a period of time.
Yeah, I agree. I think, because as you know, my firm also, we've made some baby steps into setting up in UAE and other places. But you're bang on to say there are still regulatory problems by which we are sort of hindered into going abroad. I think I'll open out the floor to the question Q&A. Some Q&As are there with me, and maybe Anand, I think you've sent me a few. And I would guess I'll read out the questions. Just put up your hand, whoever feels it's more comfortable to do it. The first one is there is always a dilemma in going for growth versus going for healthy profitability. This also affects pricing for clients, engagements. Profitability sometimes takes a preference given that professional service firms don't get valuation growth linked benefits anyways. Can high growth be sacrificed for higher profitability? Is that also a fulfilling strategy? Yeah, Dinesh? Oh, okay, Jay, you wanted to say something. Sorry.
Just very quickly, and I think a lot of people may know that already if you've done these IM courses with the professor there, is that for all professional service firms, there is a U-shaped relationship between growth and profitability, which is when you're small, you tend to be much more profitable. When you become mid-sized, your profitability tends to drop. And then you become very large, your profitability rises again. So that U-shaped relationship is something which very few firms have been able to escape, which is why the transition from a small firm, from a small professional services firm to a large professional services firm is one which very few firms will ever push through and make it to a very large firm. So when you try to go from a small firm to a large firm, your profitability will tend to drop, which makes it much more difficult because if you're a mid-sized firm, you don't have the flexibility of a small firm and you don't have the scale of a large firm. And therefore, in professional services firm management lingo, it's called the Bermuda Triangle of professional services management. So once you enter that, there's a very, very high chance that you will not exit. I mean, you talk about 90% firms having less than 4 partners. Let me give you a more chilling statistic, and this applies to all companies. 99% of all companies that have ever existed on this planet are now extinct.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we are very fortunate here to have a couple of firms which have, Haigreve's firm, for instance, is from, I think you mentioned, 1911. So, yeah. Okay, a second question, which is to the law firm and to the accounting firm, which is, unlike the legal fraternity, particularly from the accounting point of view, we suffer, as the question puts it, from unequal level playing field. And also, the accounting profession is very restrained, very conservative in its approach. Even our code of conduct is very restrained. Does that act as an impediment? Do we need to do something about it? Or given the kind of profession we are in, that is necessary? Dinesh?
Haigreve, you want to go first?
Sure. If we talk about the legal market, today our bar council and the regulatory framework, I'm not commenting rightly or wrongly, have a lot of constraints. So we can't advertise, we can't solicit business. All the partners of the firm have to be advocates, and reciprocity in practice. What you were mentioning in terms of international practice has to be there between countries. Now, all of this in today's day and age sort of put constraints on our growth. On the other hand, let's say if foreign law firms or foreign practices were allowed to be set up in India, today they are not allowed to be set up. There has to be, if I should say, a level playing field. Open it up for the Indian practices, open it up for the foreign practices, or have a step-by-step approach to open it up. And I think that will really sort of do well for all of us as professionals and as individuals. A lot many more opportunities, and it doesn't matter whether you're associated then with an Indian brand or a multinational brand. Everybody has, let's say, capacity and ability from a regulatory standpoint to sort of grow. So I think that is what is really needed. And until then, while today foreign law firms are not allowed, I think it will happen very fast. But it will be a pity if it happens in a way which constrains Indian brands from going abroad and also expanding in the same manner.
So I think, Dinesh, that's absolutely now for you. That's exactly the dilemma of the profession.
So, Haigreve and the legal fraternity have thus far, at least thus far, have had a protected regime. Foreign law firms have as yet not come in, and even when they come, if experience in Singapore and elsewhere is of any relevance, will be permitted in a particular manner of what can fly in, fly out, what can happen, not happen. Unlike that, in the accounting profession, we have had the Big Four, etc. And to some extent, I would agree that that doesn't allow a level playing field, because you are having brands which are advertising globally, have no constraints whatsoever, compared to Indian chartered accountancy firms which really have those constraints. And probably, Shariq, that explains why as an organization we chose to go down the path of tax and not the path of audit, because audit tends to be a branded product, so to say. In contrast, tax is all about delivery. And if you are able to deliver, whether it is in terms of planning, whether it is in terms of litigation, whatever else, it doesn't matter whether you have that brand or don't have that brand, whether you can advertise or not advertise. Would I say that our institute's restraints are very constricting? Maybe, but I would not be too much worried about it. I think, sure, a large part of the profession has now become business, but we don't need to go down that path. I think you could really have a very high quality professional services organization which does not advertise. We even today have councils who refuse to carry visiting cards, and they are doing very well because they are good in their thing. So I think if we say that merely because we are unable to advertise or do some things, we are unable to grow, then that is making an apology for growth rather than be the real reason. That said, I would equally agree that there is no level playing field today.
Right. No, again, I think you're right that you have actually, sometimes I believe that the Big Four, when they've come in, they've helped us also grow, because they've trained us. As you mentioned, they've made the effort to make clients know there is value in the kind of advice that you give and so on. I think there's an interesting question from a person I don't know. I am a third generation partner, a 70-year-old family-owned firm. And he said, we have striven to stick to our values, we have retained our clients, but that has itself become a kind of an impediment. And you are not able to now retain talent and people in it because you are sticking, perhaps being too conservative in the value. And the question he's asking, again, you and Haigreve, is how do we transform? How did you guys transform that?
But why is it that value is something which can be driven only because you happen to be a third generation, second generation, whatever.
Right.
Value is what the firm defines. Values is something which everybody goes by. When you bring an outsider into the firm, you will ensure that your processes are such that the inherent culture of the firm is not disturbed at all. And that's a process which one needs to undergo. But to say that you cannot grow in size merely because you have stuck to your values is implying that others would not do that. And that I think is far from correct. In fact, values tend to grow when like-minded people come together and build on each other. And good for you thus far that in a third generation you have been retaining clients, but your clients would be growing. And if you don't grow and they need more services than what you can offer currently, you are actually risking losing those clients.
Right. Completely agree. I think change is inevitable. You will have to adapt. I think Jay mentioned about being nimble. You'll have to keep changing your directions all the time. You cannot predict the future, but you have to be able to adapt to the future. President, how much more time do we have? Because it's 7:45.
5 to 10 minutes. That's fine.
Okay. Jay, a question is for you. It says, when it comes to offering strategic consulting, how do you approach a client and what sort of value offering do you make to acquire the new client? What is your mantra for turning a potential into a client? And I think, let me add to that, because very often all service firms say and claim the same thing, that, you know, we are proactive, we give quality service, we give the absolute best thing. That's, everybody says that. But how do you actually distinguish yourself and how do you convert that potential into a client?
So the unfortunate truth is that it is actually very hard to differentiate between professional service firms.
Right.
Because they're very fungible. People move from one firm to the other. So therefore, it is really very hard to differentiate. And as a Indian consulting firm, you always get compared to global consulting firms, because once and every pitch for us is a competitive pitch. There'll be always the global strategy firms or the big four pitching. So if you win, the project, they still expect the same quality that a top tier strategy firm will sort of deliver, but they will offer you a price which is not what they were, which is of course the Indian price, and that's one of the issues that you face when you're trying to get work. But the one thing, I mean, the way a client feels about a service is the way they feel about the service provider, which is, if your service is broadly similar in terms of quality to a competitor, then if the client likes the people that they're talking with, you will get the work.
Right.
As long as the quality is broadly on par, because ultimately people in this professional service, they're buying the time and attention of people. So one of the things we often get asked is that, how do you differentiate with the top tier strategy firms, with the big four, they're all global firms. And so I go back to my biology days and I give a simple example, which is that if you're if you look at a tiger chasing a deer in the Indian forest, right? You will see that the tiger is simply running for its dinner, but the deer is running for its life. That's called the life dinner principle. As a small Indian consulting firm, we are always the deer. Although we have done 1,000 consulting projects, when you're competing with the big boys, you're always running for your life on every single prospect that project you're pitching for. But for the other big firms, they're simply running for the dinner, the bonuses, or revenue, whatever it is, in general. So
Right.
I think clients like that example, and more often than not, we would then get the work.
Right. Okay, Mr. I think this is the last question, and to I agree with you. This question is addressed to you. It says, since you have an HR head, strategy head from outside, all non-lawyers, did you have any challenge in getting such non-lawyers, subject matter experts being accepted by the other partners?
I think that's a very deep question, and I have to admit that when we did have these, if I may call them, outside leaders in our firm, initially, a lot of the lawyers said that, look, who are they to teach us what to do?
Right.
And we lawyers come with a very big ego, so we're not willing to listen at all in terms of what the trends are, where to hunt for business, what else to learn, not function in the traditional way. And I can tell you, for example, when I used to go to the office to see my grandfather, it used to be like a doctor's chamber, and he used to sit there with people queuing up outside his
Right.
chamber to take turn by turn to see him. Now, if some strategy consultant came and told him that this is not the way to function, your practice will go nowhere. You have to really expand, have more people. You have to give time slots, not make anybody wait. You have to be willing to go to their offices. I think it would be a completely different picture. But I think it was the first few years with these people, I have to admit, was difficult. And then as people got and saw the benefits of what they were doing and what they were saying, and that change then happened overnight. And overnight, that change happened. Today, they are indispensable. So I
Right.
think one has to invest in actually getting them integrated. And that's what the role of leadership in our firm was.
Correct. Okay, I think we have really run out of time. It's been a fantastic session. I think everyone has given real insights. You've shared your knowledge, you've shared your experiences with us. But finally, when it comes down, each one has to find his own sweet spot, as I think Jay mentioned. I am reminded of a Chinese proverb which says, every truth has four corners. As a teacher, these three gentlemen have given you one corner, and it is for you to find the other three. So I think the important thing is to embrace change. Change is inevitable, because otherwise you will be stagnant. You will not be able to grow. Henry Ford once said very interestingly, if you always do what you've always done, then you'll always get what you've always got. And I think that's the mantra. You have to change. You have to try new innovation. With this, I would close this session, a very interesting session, a very informative session, and I hope some of you have the courage now and the insights now to take the plunge. Anand, I think it's over to you to conclude and give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Shariq Bhai. Chirag will do the honors of giving the vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, President. Before just giving the vote of thanks, I will just make a couple of announcements. The 15th residential course on GST has been announced, which is on 3rd of June. There are two courses which BCS is running. One is certification course on forensic accounting and investigation studies, and the second one is on the idea analytics. And the International Taxation Committee has announced the 21st course on DTA, which is starting from 12th of Feb, spreaded over 7 Sundays, 7 Saturdays, and 7 Fridays. So everybody can take benefit of them. Coming to my task for today, to give a formal vote of thanks to the esteemed panel and the moderator. I would start with Jai Desai. Jai, you definitely explained us how to start with a very low capital and create something big, which you mentioned, and somewhere where you mentioned that 85% of your client should be on the strategic side, which helps you to grow that firm in terms of consulting. The another key element which you mentioned was key to adaptability is must, which I think all the panelists also mentioned, that adaptability is something which is key. And another key takeaway from your thoughts was that professionals could be the next management consultants or something like for a small jobs, which could be the next trend of it. So thanks for sharing your views openly and frankly on how a consulting advisory firm can grow from scratch. And personally, it helps me a lot because 1.5 years back, I took that plunge which Shariq Bhai is continuously talking, and I took it in the advisory front. So it helps me a lot on that front. So thank you for all your thoughts and processes. Coming to Mr. Khaitan, I think the firm, all of us knows it's highly privileged to be a part of your organization. If I'm a lawyer, 110-year-old history, which is for a firm to carry, it's too difficult and long. But you well explained how you transited from physical to an IT infra to now something which is dependent on connectivities and cloud-based environment which you have to move. Knowledge management systems, people, processes are very key for a firm to go for such a long tenure. So, and specialization, as you mentioned, in the law firm as well as for a CA firm is going to be the need of the hour. So, thanks for sharing those thoughts and how an organization which is in second or third generation, how it can still go beyond and more is what will help a lot of CA firms, because many of the firms are entering that 50th year and the 40th year. So that would definitely help a lot of us. So thanks for sharing your thought of the entire journey of your firm and the problems you faced and the solutions for the same. So thanks for sharing all those stuffs with our members. So thank you for that. Coming to Dinesh Bhai, our own, and you definitely asked to keep your introduction short, but I would take some time to give the vote of thanks for sure, because that you didn't mention to keep it short. So with you disclose a lot of stuff how Dhruva started and how it grew. One of the very important element was be different. Don't try to compete with maybe a big four or a big large CA firm. Try to do something different. Specialize into particular areas. Don't do tasks which are very normal or done by others. Where you said you completely concentrated on tax and regulatory practices and not normal taxation practices which you could have. You gave us the vision for how to grow and go global, which would definitely help to fulfill the vision of how a firm can go global. So that is what you shared. Frankly, you shared a lot of elements of how you did the setup, compensations. The evaluation of partner is more critical than the compensation of the partner, which would definitely give us a lot of thought to many CA firms what they should actually be looking at, where the name of the partner is not that important, but the firm name or the goodwill is more important than anything else. So thanks for sharing those thoughts openly and frankly with all of us, which most of the participants have also on the chat acknowledged about the frankness and the way you guys have cleared it. So thanks for sharing that with all of us and the generation. Coming to Shariq Bhai for moderating this session, I think the kind of question, the direction which was given to this panel today was amazing. Most of us have goosebumps when we heard about how this entire journey went, and your straight and direct questions, including on goodwill, compensations, issues which partners face, marketing issues. I think bringing all of that together, and where one of the key point was, which you cleared, was technology may not replace, everybody feels will replace CA. But what you mentioned was technology entity may definitely replace a technology averse entity. So that is more important than technology replacing a chartered accountant. Changes are painful, but not changing is disaster. Which again, that key thought which clicked most of us. So to thank you for bringing this all together and well-researched questions, which helps a lot of CA firms like growing firms like ours. So thanks for moderating this whole session and keeping the panel most intact and interesting. So with this, and thanks to all who helped to carve out this program and make this program a success. And thanks to all participants for posing the good questions to make it more interesting and interactive. So thanks for the same, and I think we all give a round of applause to whole panelists and moderators and all organizers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.